Matthew Olszewski.
All right. So formal. Went with my birth certificate name. Matthew Allen. That's right. There we go. Okay, good morning, everybody. Um, Man, the past 2 weekends have been amazing for some of you that went to Women's Weekend and Man Makers. If you didn't, you probably had an amazing weekend as well. But the past 2 weekends, it's been cool to see God take young people to a place where they are with women, they are with men, and they are worshiping and seeking and trying to just know who He is and what His plan and His purpose is for their lives. Um, we went to Manmaker this past weekend. It was awesome. It was tiring. And it's just great, as I'm sure it is at Women's Weekend, to hear like one manly voice singing together and one womanly voice singing together. Just that one sound of over 200 women, over 200 men lifting their voices to God in worship. It's awesome. And then you just look around and you see people praying for each other. That is what we want to be as the church. That is the display that we want to be here in our own very own house, our church house, but then to go out and for the world to see that happening, I think is a powerful thing for the world to witness. And so I was just blown away at Man Makers, at least, because, they don't invite me to Women's Weekend, but just amazing. So, okay, if you've been with us so far this semester, we've been doing this series called The Wilderness. The Wilderness. And we've been talking about how this wilderness experience that we all know that we've had, we can't really put our finger on it of why it's there or what exactly it means all the time, but we know that we're in the wilderness just by the way that we feel. And we've been talking about how the wilderness is like a place where we don't really sense that God is with us. We don't really know what's happening. Just life seems chaotic. It seems difficult. And so the wilderness is this experience that we have where just life is hard. And so the first week we talked about, well, where does this wilderness experience come from? Why does it even exist in the world? And we just talked about at the beginning of Genesis, sin. Sin came into the world and it caused this ripple effect, this ripple effect of a disease that infects every single person, all of us. And sin causes chaos and hurt and pain, which is what we experience when we're in the wilderness. And then a few weeks ago, Pastor Tom, he talked about, well, where is God when other people's choices impact us in the way that they cause pain in our lives, and it sends us into the wilderness? So where is God when all of that happens? And he talked through the story of Hagar in Genesis and how God says, I see you and I care for you. That God, when we're in the wilderness, He sees us and He cares for us. And this week, we're going to talk more about, well, what does God do when by our own actions, we send ourselves into the wilderness? By our very own sin, by the things that we choose to do, the choices that we make, then sends us into this place of the wilderness. And so now we're going to be going into the book of Exodus. We've been in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. Now we're going to be in Exodus, the second book of the Bible. And let me just summarize Exodus chapter 2, and then we'll kind of get into near the end of chapter 2 and into chapter 3. So we get the birth story of a very specific Israelite boy named Moses. And we're going to really be seeing just a very specific part of Moses' life. And that's going to be the main focus of this morning. And so Moses' birth and life story, it builds really fast in chapter 2. Like, he goes from being born to like an adult, okay? So there's not much detail, really just the details that are necessary. So he's born, his mother hides him for 3 months, okay? And the reason that she hides Moses for 3 months is because they're in Egypt, and the Egyptian king, Pharaoh, he has declared that every single Israelite boy that is born, they must be killed. Because the Israelites have come to Egypt to live, and they are starting to grow in number. And the Egyptians are getting a little worried. Like, hey, if they keep popping babies out, their population is going to rise, and they could overtake us. So they get a little scared, and they put the Israelites into slavery. I mean, they're oppressing them. They are working them hard. The pyramids that we see in Egypt today, we could probably safely say that there are some Israelites that made those, because Egypt just pushed them and pushed them to the bone to make those things. And so Moses hides Moses for 3 months, but then she can't hide him anymore. Like, he becomes a little too loud and too noticeable. So she concocts a plan, and she sends him down the river in this like little raft that she makes, and she sends him down the river, and it just so happens that the Egyptian king's daughter is going down to the river to bathe, and she finds Moses. And she actually has compassion, right? This is the king's daughter who knows what her father has declared, and she's like, oh, I feel bad for this little Israelite boy. Moses' mom sees this, tells Moses' sister, go down and tell this Egyptian woman and ask her if an Israelite woman can take care of this baby. And so that's what she does. She runs down, and basically they trick the Egyptian king's daughter into letting Moses go back to his mother so that she can nurse him and take care of him and nurture him to strength. But eventually, Moses grows up to a certain age, we don't know how old, and he's given to the Egyptian king's daughter. And he goes and lives pretty much as an Egyptian in a royal Egyptian family. Like, it's crazy to think about these circumstances all coming together. And so Moses knows that he's an Israelite, but he also is living in Egyptian royalty. When he gets to his adultish years, somewhere around there, he is walking around, and he sees an Egyptian abusing and beating an Israelite. And because Moses knows that he's an Israelite, it angers him. He burns with anger, and he ends up murdering this Egyptian. And he buries him in the sand, right? They're in the desert. Buries him in the sand. And then the very next day, Moses, again, is walking around, and he sees two Israelites fighting each other, like physically fighting. And he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? You guys should be together. You should be united. Why are you fighting like this? And one of them is like, hey, who made you boss? And also, are you going to kill me? Are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian yesterday? And Moses is like, oh, crap. I didn't think anybody saw that. I didn't know I was going to be found out. And so Moses, he leaves because Pharaoh finds out. And even though Moses is living in this Egyptian royal family, Pharaoh has no mercy whatsoever. Oh, you killed one of our people? Well, I'm going to get you. And so Moses leaves, and he flees, and he runs off to a faraway land. And in this faraway land, we're told that Moses, he gets married, he has a child, and he's essentially removed himself completely from everything that happened back in Egypt. Like he is just living a brand new life, right? This murder he committed, the fear of being hunted down by the king of Egypt has overwhelmed him, and he is content with just staying at a distance. And here's what the story tells us in Exodus 2, verse 23. It says, the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out. So here's what we have. We have Moses, who at one point got so angry that one of his own people were being abused that he was willing to murder someone to make things right, at least from his perspective. But now we have Moses in a faraway land, in the wilderness, and it's almost as like he doesn't care about what is happening to his people back in Egypt. He's been in the wilderness for a long time now, probably starting to feel pretty comfortable, right? He has a family now. He has some cattle to shepherd. He has a field to take care of. He has a father-in-law. He has all sorts of things. Like he has built a brand new life in this wilderness, and I am sure his mind sometimes drifts back and starts to think, I wonder what's happening back in Egypt. I wonder if my people are still being enslaved. I wonder if they're still being abused. I wonder if they're still being beaten like I saw. But I'm sure, and I don't know this for sure, but I just am trying to think like a human. I'm sure he just tries to push it off. Now, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to think about that. What we have here is that his anger, then his murder, and then the fear that he experienced, it sent his life goal into life preservation. Like everything about Moses' life, through his anger, his murder, and then his fear of getting murdered himself, his life goal, his life purpose now became about self-preservation. I just need to stay alive. I just need to stay here. I need to stay comfortable. I need to do what I need to do. Which, if we've ever felt that way, or if we feel that way now, I would say there are drastic effects that if we make our life goal and our life purpose as self-preservation and all about us, there are drastic impacts that not only impact our lives, but impact the lives of the people around us. We talked about this at Manmaker this weekend. We talked about a verse in 1 Corinthians 16. It's not going to pop up on the screen, but there were some phrases and some statements out of 1 Corinthians 16 that we talked about at Manmaker. It says, be watchful, be strong, let all that you do be done in love. We talked about men. We need to open our eyes and see and look around and be watchful at what is happening around us. Are there people to be protected? Are there people to be rescued? Are there people to be loved? And so our eyes need to open up and not just walk around blindly or just walk around where our eyes are consistently just focused on ourselves. We talked about how to be strong, not just physically strong, but to be a person of conviction, to be a person that's going to stand firm in the truth of what God tells us. Not only just what God tells us is true and that we should have conviction on, but what God tells us is true about who we are as men and as women. Have strength in that. And then let all that you do be done in love. Men can be sensitive in love, and they can be strong as well. We talked about both sides of that spectrum, is that We can be strong, we can be watchful, we can be a protector, we can be a provider, but we also need to do this with great love. And so when we do the opposite of this, there's, I think, a drastic impact that we don't give enough attention to. And I know that I didn't give you notes this week. You can fill in notes, but here's a note that you can write. Here's an impact that I think happens when we run. When we run into the wilderness, we remove ourselves from the mission of God. When we run into the wilderness, we remove ourselves from the mission of God. Now, I want to be very clear here because I know that there are some people, and I know that I have done this myself when I've heard a phrase like that, is that sometimes I will say, or I will want to believe, when we run into the wilderness, we remove ourselves from the love of God. But think about the two songs that we just got done singing. They were all about the extravagant love that God has for us. And so when we run into the wilderness, when we make choices, when our sin causes chaos in our lives and other people's lives, it doesn't mean that when we run into the wilderness that we're removing ourselves from the love of God. We're just removing ourselves from the mission of God. That's what Moses has done. He's made himself completely absent from the mission of God. Our memory verse for this month, it's not going to be up on the screen, but it's very short. John 14:15. If you love me, keep my commands. If you love me, keep my commands. But here's what I want us to really understand, and I think I said this last week during our Simple Sunday. God already loved us first. So the focus isn't always on if you love me. The focus should be on, well, God already loved me first. And so my response to obey his commands is in response to the love that he already has for me. And I think that's what is going to be shown to Moses here as we continue in this story. When we have these times of wilderness, when sin sends us into the wilderness experience, I really do believe it removes us from the mission of God. Not geographically, like Moses, but I think internally. Like our heart changes. Our heart disconnects from what God wants. And like I said earlier, there's hurting people everywhere. There's loneliness everywhere. There's the abused everywhere. There's tormented people everywhere. There's addicted people everywhere. And that describes some of us in this room. And I think our call and my hope this morning that as Christians, that we don't separate ourselves from the mission of God. Okay? Now, this is not a message of shame and guilt this morning. So far, it seems a little bit heavy, but I am aiming at the heart. Okay? I have an arrow pointed, hopefully, directly at all of your hearts. That is the goal. I want it to hurt a little bit. I think that's my job as a pastor sometimes, but here's the good thing. The good news is that when the target is at the heart, God is always using that moment of where the arrow hits the heart and it's painful and it's challenging and it's convicting and we might feel a little bit of guilt and shame. There's always something good that God is going to reveal on the other side of that. And that's what we're going to notice here in a little bit. Because while Moses is running away from God's mission, God is still at work. He's still at work. So here's what it says after the Israelites groaned in their slavery and they cried out for help. It says, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning. Right? The Israelites are crying out for help. Moses is nowhere to be seen, but God hears. And God's going to do something about it. And spoiler alert, Moses is going to get back involved because God always wants to use people that want to remove themselves from the mission of God. He wants to invite us back in. Even when we are in the wilderness due to our own sin, even when we've made the choice to do something that causes this separation, that causes this disobedience, God still says, I can still use you. I can still use what you have in you if you just trust me, if you accept my invitation. And here's how the invitation went for Moses. It says, now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. So just to give you some context and perspective of how far Moses has run away from his responsibilities and his mission that God has for him. It's about a 2 to 3 week travel on foot from where he was in Egypt to Mount Horeb. 2 to 3 weeks just trekking on foot. Right? That doesn't seem very far for us, but to walk pretty much continuously, probably 12, 14 miles a day for 2 to 3 weeks, he wanted to distance himself. He didn't just go to the next town and hang out to get away. He's just like, God won't find me here, right? I'm going to be far away enough. I want to kind of take a pause here, and I want to revisit something that I said a few weeks ago. I talked about this statement that I think is commonly said within culture. Everything happens for a reason. And I talked about how that's not a very helpful statement to say that everything happens for a reason, because there are some crazy, evil, wicked atrocities that happen in this world, and there are a lot of people that would say, well, why did that happen? What was the point of that? And so I kind of left it at that, but I didn't really go into why I think that is a bad statement, that everything happens for a reason. Because sometimes we're not going to get a reason for why things happen. Like sometimes the reason for things that happen to us is so big and so complex and so confusing that only God knows that reason. It would not be helpful for us to know the reasons. But here's what I think is more helpful, is that everything that happens, God can use for his purpose. I think that's more helpful for us to understand and believe that everything happens, even if we don't understand the reason for it, God can give it a purpose. And here's why I think we should be encouraged by that, is that it should give us confidence that we cannot change the plans of God, even by like one decision we make. Even by one decision we make. Even when we do things like Moses and we run, God always has a plan to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. There's a fancy word for that. That's called the sovereignty of God. God has authority and control over all things, and he has an ultimate will and an ultimate plan, and there's nothing we can do, no decision that can change that. And I think sometimes we think, oh man, I've done too much in my life. I've made too many mistakes in my life that God can't use me. He's about to get Moses back in the game, and he can do the same for us. So here's where God gets Moses' attention in Exodus 3. It says, there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. I find this statement very funny. I think the Bible is funny sometimes. That Moses is just like, oh, things usually burn. This is not burning. I should go investigate. It's just funny to me. It doesn't need to be funny to you, but it's funny to me. So Moses goes over to this bush, and I think the point, and we're going to move pretty quickly for the rest of the message here, I think the point of this bush is very simple. That when God can give us purpose in the wilderness, we need to look for God's invitation. I think this burning bush was just like, Moses, look over here. See this? This is strange. You should come over here. That was the whole point. And so when we're in the wilderness, when we feel like, where is God? How is God going to get me out of the wilderness? I think we need to start being watchful, looking around, and look for God's invitation to get back into his mission. That was the whole point. And so I think he's trying to get our attention all the time. I don't know what that looks like all the time, though. Could be him speaking directly to you. Could be someone else helping you get your attention. Could be a time of reading scripture. I can't really tell you how he's going to get your attention, but I feel like on Friday I had a brief moment. Okay, I had a brief moment where I was in the wilderness. It was very short, but I had to deal with a house issue that I did not have time to deal with that day. Like, I just had too many things to do, and there were frozen pipes, and there was a furnace that had not been on for a very long time at one of my family members' house that I was checking on. And this quickly became a frustration for me, and I started throwing a pity party for myself. I had to get a furnace guy over to the house to help fix, and I just didn't want to deal with it that day. And I was angry, frustrated. And so this guy comes over, and I'm trying to be nice. Like, I'm just trying to just get through this, hope he fixes the furnace, and we can both be on our way, right? Like, that's my mentality. And then out of nowhere, he's like, hey, what do you do for work? I'm like, oh, crap. And I felt like that was my moment. Like, when he asked me, that was like the burning bush. Like, hey, Matt, wake up. There's a real person in front of you that might need to hear something. So I told him I'm a pastor. And I was like, do you go to church? Is there a church that you regularly attend? And we just had a great conversation. We talked about the different times that he's tried to get involved in church, the different experiences that he's had, and we just had a great moment, just waiting for the temperature in the house to rise to see if he had actually fixed the furnace. And it was a moment where I felt like God needed to get my attention, tell me to get back into the mission of God and not waste this moment. So God, he's going to give us an invitation. We just need to look for it. And then the story continues in verse 4 of chapter 3. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Okay, and this is very simple. I believe God is always speaking, and he's ready to say something to us. And so our purpose in the wilderness is listen for God's invitation. We got to look for it. Now we need to listen. Again, I don't know exactly what that's always going to look like or sound like, but we need to listen for God's invitation. And then finally, verses 11 and 12 in Exodus 3. It says, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? So God is asking Moses, okay, I've gotten your attention. I've said something to you. And now I'm going to ask you to go back to Egypt and save my people. And Moses is like, well, who am I that I should do that? And God said, I will be with you. And I want you to remember this, okay, as we continue. I will be with you. And this will be the sign that to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Then Moses says, well, what if they ask this? Or what if they ask that? So then God literally lays it out for him and says exactly what will happen. He's telling Moses, okay, if they say these things or they say that, this is exactly what's going to happen. This is how it's going to go down. So then Moses again responds with, well, what if they don't believe me or listen to me? And God again, he goes to work and he does miracle after miracle. Like basically, like, hey, that staff that you have, it's going to turn into a snake. Show them that. And he does it in front of Moses right there. And then he tells Moses to put his hand inside his cloak. Like if they don't believe the snake thing, how about you stick your hand in your cloak and take it out, and you're going to have leprosy, and it's going to be white, and it's going to be infected. And then when you put it back in, it's going to be healed. Why don't you show them that trick and let them know that God is with you? And then God says, if they still don't believe you after you do those things, then why don't you take water from the Nile and dump it on the ground, because it'll turn into blood. Like, I'm giving you things, Moses, that I want you to do if they don't believe you. And even after all this, Moses was still reluctant, and he was making excuses, and he was like, well, I don't speak very well. Like, the words that come out of my mouth, I don't know if they're going to be helpful. And he just makes excuse after excuse, and he finally says, fine, I'll give you Aaron. Aaron is good with words. He'll help you. But here's the thing. Moses was missing the point. And I think God was really gracious with him. God told him right up front, which I told you to remember, we just talked about it probably a minute ago. He's saying, I will be with you. Basically saying, you are not the one that has to do these things, Moses. You don't have to turn the staff into a snake. You don't have to make your hand with leprosy. You don't have to turn water into blood. I just need you to go, and I'll do these things for you because I will be with you. And I think sometimes for us, we get in our head and our heart and we think, well, I don't want to go because I don't know what I'm doing. And that might be the case. You might not know what you're doing. Moses didn't know what he was doing. But I think he eventually understood that God was with him. And that's your final purpose in the wilderness, is that God is with you. God is with you. If we've seen anything throughout this wilderness series, is that God sees us, he hears us, he's with us, and we can take confidence and we can have strength so that we can enter back into the mission of God. And so we're not going to go through the rest of the story, but I think many of you know the rest of the story, is that Moses does go back. He gets his people, he rescues them, he leads them, and eventually Moses becomes an incredible yet still very imperfect leader who gets back into the mission of God. He becomes a great leader, yet still imperfect. I think that's all we need. That's very simple. We can be strong leaders, yet very imperfect, and not always have the confidence in ourselves, but we know that God is with us in this mission of helping redeem the world. And again, the evidence that we know that God is with us is that 2,000 years ago, Jesus was born. He walked the earth. He lived a perfect life. And then eventually, he went to a cross and was killed for the sin of the world that caused the wilderness in the first place, that we talked about in week 1 of this series. That sin was so destructive, so separating of God and humanity, that God said, I can't have this happen. I need to show them that I'm with them. So he sent Jesus, God in the flesh, to this earth to die for us. To say, I'm here with you. And I'm going to take care of this wilderness issue for you. Because I love you and I care for you. So we're just going to finish up this morning because I know this is hard to do on our own. Like some of you might be thinking, I want to do this. It feels very hard to do this on my own. We need God's help. That's certain. That's a given. We need God's help. But we need the help of one another. That's what these past 2 weekends were about with Women's Weekend and Manmaker. We're not alone here together in this church. That's why we value life groups and friendship and growing in our faith so we can push one another and encourage one another and hold one another up when we get discouraged. So sometimes we just need the support of people in this room. That is the role of the church. That the people in this room, the people that would say, I belong to H2O Church, that we would love one another really well. So I just want to close this morning with an opportunity for, if you're here and you feel like you are in the wilderness and you've put yourself there through decisions that you've made, sin that you've given into, sin that has controlled you, I want to pray for you. And so after I get done here and as we sing, I'm going to be back in that corner, and then Sarah Birchfield, she's going to be back in that corner. And anytime during the next few songs, if you need prayer for something, please go back there. We're trying to make it in the back so it's out of the way. You don't have to come up here and be in front of everybody. So if you just feel like during the next few songs that you need prayer, please, we'll be back there. But I'm going to pray for you now as we get ready to worship. Lord Jesus.